Hello everybody, a quick intro. So in ARPGs, you can earn experience and do quests and activities and things like that by, creating artwork. So if I wanted to go hunting with one of my characters, I would draw them hunting. But you're also allowed to submit literature, so you can write a little story and submit that rather than draw. So you don't have to necessarily be an artist to participate in these kinds of games and roleplays. And one day I just sort of felt like writing something, so I wrote this very little hunting entry. That's literally all it is. A character goes hunting. But I thought today, instead of just sort of talking over this Speedpaint, I would just sort of read this story, one of my little hunting entries. And yeah, it's pretty simple, but I hope you like it. Glit nosed about at the ground, pushing aside the sand as he snuffled about in search of any telltale holes burrowed into the dune. The sun beat down overhead, casting deep blue shadows along the landscape, even as the warm day waned away into twilight. It was hardly the best time to hunt, but he was hungry, and soon smaller and more agile predators would take over and offer some unwelcome competition in his quest to get dinner. He sat back on his haunches with a huff and looked at where his rider was setting up camp in the alcove of a rocky outcropping, beneath the stone overhang that cast some welcome shadow from the unpleasant and unpredictable desert weather. He'd very much like to get dinner for two, at least, if it was all manageable, so he hauled himself up and over the dune, taking his feet a bit further away from their temporary camp. The air was dry as he opened his mouth and tasted it, letting the scents of Theedale make themselves known to him before he caught a whiff of a rabbit and felt his tail start to wag in unconscious delight. Rabbit was always a good meal, especially roasted over a spit after a long day of traveling. Glit followed the smell a ways before he found himself in a sparsely grassed plain, where he spotted his quarry nibbling on some yellowed weeds in the shadow of a plateau. He dropped low on his haunches, straightening his tail behind him as he moved quietly forward, trying to close as much distance as he could before he was inevitably noticed. The sand was dry and therefore nearly silent as he moved slowly forward. It wasn't until a bit of dry straw crinkled beneath his pads that the hare's slender ears twitched and its head swiveled, wild eyes searching anxiously for the end of the world, and found it in Glit. It froze, trapped for a moment in his gaze, terrified, and just as Glit was about to bound forward toward it, from the side there was a blur of motion. A gray fox had darted out from behind the stone projected by the base of the plateau, grabbing the distracted rabbit in its jaws without stopping as it continued running away with its stolen prize. Glit yelped in surprise and then snarled in frustration at the gall of the little predator to steal his meal out from under him. He could respect the moxie, but he had no intentions to humor it. Glit took off after the creature, tearing up the papery grass from the dusty soil beneath his paws. The little fox sent sprays of sand behind it as it ran as fast as it could across the sun-bleached prairie with its prize, but even with the head start it had gained from its little surprise attack, a fox could simply not outrun a Veyron. He closed the distance quickly, opening his jaws to clamp down on its tail, only for it to quickly jerk to the right and dive into a foxhole in one of the grassy dunes. He skidded to a halt, scrabbling at the earth as he tried and failed to make a turn as tight and neat as the agile little animal, stubbling over his own tail before he righted himself and jogged over to inspect the tunnel that sheltered his prize. It was a small foxhole, and usually those had more than one exit, but jamming his muzzle in and smelling, the scent was thick and unmuddled by breeze, and he suspected this wasn't its usual burrow, and perhaps it, too, had anticipated there being another exit to it. He heard the fox snarl from within the darkness, and pulled his muzzle out. It was too deep to reach in and grab, and that would certainly net him an unpleasant bite anyway. He paced in front of the burrow and thought, eyeing it suspiciously in case it opted to make another break for it again, rather than wait him out. It seemed like the remaining option was an obvious one. Magic. Glit sat back and focused on the entrance of the tunnel, laying his ears flat against the breadth of his neck and laying his antsy tail still on the ground. He felt the telltale electric prickling along his spine and creeping upward and outward, like every hair on his back was standing straight upright as he summoned his arcane abilities to the forefront. Glit wrinkled his nose and leaned forward, reaching into the foxhole with just his magic, and plucked the creature out with a quick yank. It squealed in surprise and confusion as it was pulled out, scrabbling at the dirt and then floated upward in the air, held only by his shimmering pink energy. Glit reached into the hole and pawed about before pulling out the rabbit as well. He eyed the squirming fox with a wry grin. He'd outfoxed a fox today and managed dinner for two after all.